This book is 23 years of research, primary research on my part, and 6 years of proof of concept. And it explains how organizations can avoid self-destruction. Organizations fail because of change, and leadership is inexperienced with the change they're being faced with. For example, if you have 40 employees and you grow and suddenly you have 400 employees, you have to manage your employees very, very differently, right? If you have 40 customers and suddenly you have 400 customers, it's a very different process for managing your customers. So that's just examples of how growth creates change.
Hi, I'm Zorina Dimitrova, and welcome to the Grow and Learn podcast. Here I host thought leaders on business growth, transformation, leadership, and succeeding in life and business with a human focus. At Grow and Learn, we are the only ones offering uniquely customized solutions to business needs using a cutting-edge AI business growth assessment tool and a global network of top-tier experts to craft and execute strategies that drive impactful results. If you're ready to grow smarter, book a call today at GrowNLearn.org and let's transform your business together. Enjoy this episode. Welcome back to Grow and Learn, everyone. Today I'm speaking to a generational entrepreneur, somebody who's seen success, who's seen a fall of success, who's managed to draw the conclusions and the relevant advice for people who are in business. I'm speaking to Larry Mandelberg. Welcome, Larry.
Good morning, good afternoon, Zarina.
Pleasure to have you. Your
Thank
story
you.
starts somewhere in the 1800s, your family story. Why did you decide to tell your story so far back?
Well, I think the concept of what I'm trying to share is one of sustainability, the ability of an organization to continue to survive and thrive for years and years, decades and decades, centuries, through good times and bad, by demonstrating that I have some exposure to that. I think creates credibility, first of all. The fact that my family started in hides and furs and evolved through many different industries and was successful each step of the way is proof that it can happen. And my family, there's this concept of pay it forward. And I think my family was one of the original families to do that. I like to say I have 180 years of business experience because my great-great-grandfather taught my great-grandfather everything he knew. My great-grandfather taught my grandfather. So they passed all that knowledge forward. So by the time it came to me, I have almost 2 centuries of accumulated knowledge that gives me a little bit of a competitive edge, if you will. And I just believe in sharing that. I believe in sharing that so people don't fail.
Mm-hmm. You're right. Actually, many people disregard the generational experience, the learned experience from childhood. We tend to entrust so much in universities and in knowledge that you acquire once you're an adult, but it's actually inbuilt in you to a large extent. So you're an author of the book, How Not to Commit Business Suicide, or what is it?
It's businesses don't fail, they
Aha.
commit suicide.
Why this title and how did you come to this conclusion?
Yeah, I love that question. About 10 or 11 years ago, my consulting practice was struggling to find a way to communicate what we did. We were struggling to explain to people what we do. It's kind of a there's a lot of consultants out there, and a lot of them sound like they all do the same thing. So I wanted to understand how our market, how our customers thought about us. And I hired someone to do a brand equity examination. And during the course of our interviews, she made a comment to me about business failure. And I reacted because I don't believe a business fails. I believe people make bad decisions that cause them to fail. So it's proactive, hence the term suicide. So I made that comment. I said to her, businesses don't fail, they commit suicide. And she thought that was interesting. She captured it. About about well, we were on this project for about a year, and at the end of the project, when we were done, she gave me her final report. She said, "By the way, I have the title of your book." And I said, "What do you mean?" She says, "I know what the title of your book is." And I said, "Okay." So she mocked up a book, and I was in the process of writing it at that time. And she showed it to me, and I said, "That's perfect. That's a great title. How'd you come up with it?" She said, "You said it. You said it earlier in the year. Here's my notes right here where you said it." So it's a title that just came out of my mouth without my even thinking about it.
Mhm. Great that you captured it.
She captured it.
Yeah. So what's in the book, according to my understanding, I haven't read it yet, but it has to do with classifying the reasons for failing. Is that correct?
Yeah, that let me explain it a little differently. The title of any book is really the attention grabber. The subtitle should tell you what it's about. So the subtitle of the book is How to Survive Success and Thrive in Good Times and Bad. So when an organization is successful, it grows. And as an organization grows, the world that it exists in changes. You don't manage 5 employees the way you manage 50. You can't manage 50 the way you manage 500. If you have one location, it's different than 2 locations or 5 locations or 50 locations, 10 customers. All of these things change as you're successful. And when when leadership teams are faced with change that they're unfamiliar with, that they don't have experience with, they're forced to make decisions without enough information. And those decisions can be costly. They can be small costs. You can lose a little bit of time or a little bit of money, or you could lose staff. But many of these decisions can be fatal, can actually kill or destroy the company if you make the wrong decision. So what this book is about is it explains the evolution of how organizations grow. It's part of a theory called corporate lifecycle theory. It's something that's been studied for a little over 30 years. And if you think about it, it's very similar to the way a child or a human grows. We all know at the beginning we can't take care of ourselves. Then we learn to walk. Then we learn to go to the bathroom by ourselves, and we learn to dress ourselves. And over time, we change, we age, we mature. We lose our baby teeth, we go through puberty, and towards the end of our lives, we lose our hair, our muscles. It's totally predictable. Businesses are nothing more than people. Just as people age, so do businesses. And that aging process is totally predictable. It's absolutely as predictable as step one, step two, step three. The next step is step four. So by looking at this evolutionary process, I was able to identify the key milestones where most of the problems occur, where most of the bad decisions are made. And I was able to evaluate both failures and successes. I was able to extract what people were doing that allowed them to be successful and continue to thrive. And that's what the book does. It explains these stages of evolutionary growth, what I like to call maturity, that are applied to almost any business.
Thinking about the life cycle of businesses, do the decision does the decision making process that you're pointing towards in this book account for the different industries the companies operate in and the life cycle according to industry, or would you say that's irrelevant?
Well, I wouldn't say it's irrelevant. I would say that it depends on the circumstance. In my case, there are when I started to research this, I had to identify a subset of businesses. I knew that there were too many different types of organizations for me to look at every one of them. So I had to identify a subset of businesses for my study. So my study was constrained to four characteristics. The first, there has to be a desire for sustainability. If you have a family-owned shoe store and your kids don't want it and you don't care, when you retire, you're going to close the shoe store or sell it. So those kinds of businesses aren't part of my research. They don't apply. The second characteristic was that there has to be more than one layer of management, meaning solopreneurs, or if you have a business where everybody reports to the same person, to one person, those weren't part of my study. And part of the reason for that was because they tend to not, historically, they tend to not grow. People tend to say it's my job, it's my business, but it's also my life and my job, and I don't want to grow. I want to stay small. So those aren't part of my demographic. Multiple layers of management. The third one, my expertise is in wholesale or business to business. So I excluded all organizations with any primary sources of revenue from retail activities. Retail is off the table.
Mhm.
And the last one is that they had to be autonomous. They had to be able to make decisions that were in the best interest of the organization and its customers, not investors. So that takes all publicly traded companies off the table. It takes all companies with silent partners. It still leaves a very large group of people. Interestingly, what came out of that was that the data in this book, the research, is applicable to any organization that meets those criteria, independent of market, independent of legal structure, independent of size.
Mhm.
So it
How
works
did
for
you?
nonprofits, educational institutions, government, you name it.
It works even for government, although there's a clear structure of like directional management for
Well, there's
government.
yeah, I do, I do talk about this a little bit. So when I say it works in the public sector, I can say that because A, they were part of my research, and B, I've applied this methodology to the government. Specifically, one of my clients was a U.S. House representative, which is a federal office. So they have an office in DC, and this particular representative covered a large enough territory that they had to have two local offices in their district. So they had three offices, and those offices were essentially independent organizations coordinating with each other. Um, he had the autonomy to do whatever he needed to do to serve his constituents, right? He was an elected member of the House, and he was governed by all the other laws we all are, but laws are laws. They don't doesn't matter what industry you're in, it's a law. And so he had autonomy. It wasn't retail, and there was more than one layer of management. And of course, he wanted those governmental services to his constituents to thrive. So when you have any environment that meets those four criteria, it works.
Mhm. How did you conduct your research? Was it like primary research? You would call them. Tell us a bit about the process.
Yeah, it was primary research. Thank you for asking that. It was, like I say, it was 23 years. I interviewed 250 executives within the top three tiers of management. So they had to be in that level, at that level, and 100 different organizations. So that is a statistically valid sample size. And I interviewed organizations that had people from organizations that had failed, organizations that were thriving and organizations that were in the midst of this turmoil and trying to figure out how to survive. And so I started with a hypothesis. I built a construct, ended up with a theory, and then once I had that theory, I had to test it. So I did 6 years of proof of concept on the theory, and those 6 years. So the way proof of concept works is you try to prove the idea, the theory wrong, right? You're constantly looking for ways to make the theory not be valid. So through 6 years of proof of concept, I was unable to do that. So I stopped that process and I said, it works. And I've been doing that ever since.
Impressive work. Can
Thank
you
you.
share a little bit about the meat of this decision-making process? So what exactly is different at different stages, or maybe share a bit what's in the book? I'm kind of trying to feel a little bit of the
Yeah.
kind of the content, because now we have a few layers of the life cycle of the company, the type of company, and so what's in it actually?
So, so the first 3 chapters discuss the entire process of getting to the data, collecting it, analyzing it, turning it into something useful. Those are the first 3 chapters. Chapters 4 through 11 are discuss 8 different indicators, 8 different indicators of organizational capacity to create sustainable growth. So they're leading indicators. They're not financial indicators. Financial indicators are all lagging. So each of those 8 chapters, those next 8 chapters, dive into each of those indicators. It talks about the benefits. There's a true story, a real life story from my experience. So they're fictionalized because companies don't want people to know about their problems, but they're all true stories. It talks about how to create the indicator if you don't have it. It talks about how to implement the indicator if you don't have it. It talks about how to maintain the indicator. So it's literally a how-to guide to do all this. Chapter 12 talks about how to put all of this together. There's an assessment tool I developed called the Business Manager's Reality Index. It takes about 10 minutes. You have your top leadership each take the assessment. It's a survey. It ranks all 8 of those components from weakest to strongest, and it tells you your weakest component. And what you then do is you focus on that one weakest component to strengthen it. So it's literally taking an organization, cutting it into 8 building blocks and saying, this is the weakest, fix this one first. Then go to the second weakest. So that's the tactical part of it. Let me give you the high level 100,000-foot piece of it. Based on my research, and I want to be clear here, about 80% of this is research. About 10 or 20% of this is common information, practical information that's been around for over 100 years. And about 10 or 15% of it is opinion and interpretation on me. This is not about me touting how smart I am. This is me sharing knowledge and how to apply it. So what I found is that organizations live in 3 stages of maturity. I call them youth, adolescence, and adulthood. Maturity, it's organizational maturity, not individual maturity. And the maturity is measured by experience. Not expertise, not talent, not capability, not knowledge, not time, not revenue. It's based on experience. Organizations with narrow and shallow experience, we don't know a lot, and we don't know a lot about what we know. That's youth.
How do you measure
Adolescence,
experience though? Based on these KPIs or differently?
yes, with these 8 KPIs.
Mm-hmm.
Adolescence is, and you'll understand here in just a second, I'll give you the exact, there's a single thing for each stage. Adolescence is still narrow experience. We don't go very broad a field, but we know everything about our field. That's deep, broad and deep. Adulthood is We understand the world around us very, very well, including things we don't do, and we know a lot about it. That's adulthood. Organizations in youth fail because of a lack of clarity of purpose. Organizations in adolescence fail because of a lack of consistency of performance. Organizations in adulthood fail because of a lack of engagement of people. Purpose, performance, people, the three Ps. Every organization I studied failed for one of those three reasons. Finance was never part of it. It was always one of those three. If you dig deep enough, and if we start with clarity of purpose, the biggest pushback I get from people is, we know what our purpose is. We know what we do. We know why we're here. We know what our customers are. We know what our products are. That's stupid. How could we be in business if we didn't know what our purpose was? Say, fine. Go talk to 5 of your staff, any 5 different areas of the organization. I want you to ask them this question: why do we exist? What is our purpose? And I bet you will get 5 different answers. That is not clarity of purpose. If you don't want to talk to them directly, do it in your head and imagine what they would say to you. That is not clarity of purpose. Clarity of purpose is understanding who your client is, the value you deliver to them, the manner in which you deliver it, the long-term goals for your organization, not today, not tomorrow, but in 30 years or 50 years, and lastly, the environment you want to be operating in, your culture. If you don't have those 5 things defined, you do not have clarity of purpose. And if you don't have clarity of purpose, you can't progress to adolescence.
Makes
I
sense.
could I
Yeah.
could go
So
on
it's
for
a
24 hours
combination.
about this.
It,
Sorry.
it sounds like a combination of proper strategy communicated well, the clarity of purpose.
Thank you. Yes.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
purpose, performance, people.
Shall we go deeper in the other 2 stages?
Oh, I'm happy to.
Yeah.
So the biggest problem, the biggest point at which organizations fail is when they believe they're in adolescence, trying to achieve adulthood, and have failed to gain clarity of purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a point as you mature from youth to adolescence where there's this process that shifts from more is better to better is more. So when you first start and you're young, you want to sell anything you can to anybody you can. More, more, more. I need more revenue. I need more customers, right? And that's natural. There's nothing wrong with that. As you gain clarity, that all that is your ability to understand who you are best with, who values your services more, how you want to conduct your business. All of that stuff is the fertile fields of development of maturity and experience. You gain that clarity of purpose and you could move into adulthood. In adulthood, what ends up happening is you must transition from more is better, sell to anybody, sell to everybody, get as many customers, from more is better to better is more. You have to start saying no to customers and start doing a better job at executing. You can't let things fall through the cracks. You have to eliminate duplication of effort. You have to eliminate waste of effort. You have to be able to make commitments to your market and to your employees that they can depend on. Consistent performance. The classic examples is McDonald's. You go to any McDonald's anywhere in the world and you order a Big Mac, you know what's in it, you know what it looks like, you know what it smells like, you know what it tastes like, and guess what? You know how it's wrapped. That's consistency of performance. I was in a McDonald's once and they ordered a Big Mac and they brought me a burger in a quarter pounder wrapper. And I said, that's not what I ordered. And the guy said, no, no, no. It's a Big Mac. We just ran out of wrappers. So we put it in a quarter pounder wrapper. That's consistency, right?
Mhm.
So that comes from the ability to create short-term planning. There are 3 components. It's short-term planning. It's market segmentation, understanding all your markets and the nuances of each market. This market has this cycle, that market has that cycle. You have to understand them to be able to cater to them and to understand their expectations and how to fulfill them. And then everybody has to understand what their role is. Too often, businesses in this stage assign tasks to people. Empty the trash, make sure the copier is operating properly, um, follow up on all old receivables. Those are tasks. You don't want to assign people tasks. You want to assign people roles and give them goals. So you don't say empty the trash, you say keep the office clean,
Mhm.
right? So those are the components of consistent performance, that ability to plan, that ability to understand your market, and that ability to know what your role is in the big picture. Those allow the organization to work together closely so that hand in hand, everybody's working together towards the same common goal and mistakes are minimized. That's
Mhm.
consistency of performance. Go ahead.
If a company has not completely fulfilled the top requirements for uh, childhood or adolescence,
Youth,
first stage,
youth.
youth, and it transitions to stage two without being in perfect shape, can
Mhm.
it still make good decisions in stage two despite it having failed in stage one?
It can, well, it hasn't failed stage one, it just hasn't completed it.
Mm-hmm.
And it can and often does make good decisions, but what it can't do is progress in maturity. Because until you have clarity of purpose, you can't be consistent in your performance
Mm-hmm.
because you're constantly trying to serve different masters.
I see.
You have to be able to say, this is who we are, this is where we're going, this is who we serve, this is how we serve them, and this is how we conduct ourselves. Until you can say that and have broad acceptance, you don't have, think of it this way. Think of that clarity of purpose as the foundation for a building. If you have a weak foundation and you try to build 10 stories on it, it'll break. You can build one story or two stories, but if you're trying to get to 10 or 50 stories, you have to have a solid foundation, right?
Right.
And that's what happens is they feel like they should be in adolescence. They start trying to act like they're in adulthood and they keep failing to perform. So they lose clients, things fall through the cracks. You have duplication of effort, so you waste money on people doing the same thing. There's a story in the book about a client who I was working on. This is a public television station, and this was I don't remember the year, but it was when analog TV was being phased out by the government,
Mm-hmm.
and they were forcing everyone to go from analog to digital.
Right.
And this was kind of like in VHS, where there was the VHS and there was the Sony Betamax. There were two different standards, and the Betamax was 10 times better, but VHS won because they made better decisions. So they were this, and this was, this was like an eight-figure investment, tens of millions of dollars, because they're replacing all of their recording equipment, all of their editing equipment, all of their data storage equipment, all of their broadcast equipment. I mean, think about it. It's a big deal, right? Change. And there were two different standards, and they were struggling to figure out which one they should use. So they hired me. I came in, we did some analysis. During the course of my work, somebody said, I have a report I want to go grab. And they went and grabbed it. And there were seven of us, seven of the leadership team, me and six other people. And we started passing it around. And one of the other leaders said, wait a minute, just a minute. They went and they got a report and brought it back. And it was the exact same report, the same data. Didn't look the same, exactly the same data. So you had two people in leadership that needed data. They were both doing it. We started talking about it. Neither one knew the other was doing it. And we estimated, that group then estimated that they were investing $40,000 in man hours creating that report. So they were investing $80,000 of their valuable assets into a $40,000 product.
Mhm.
We eliminated that duplication. They took best practices, put them together, and immediately we're saving hundreds of hours of senior staff and junior staff, right? You have to be clear about what your purpose is before you can get those processes and systems dialed in. That never happens until you're clear about your purpose. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And the 8 KPIs that you mentioned, are they defined in the second stage or already at the first stage?
There are three of them in the first stage, three of them in the second stage, two of them in the third stage.
Mhm. Okay,
So
let's go to the third stage and then maybe go through the KPIs, or how do you prefer that? I'm just
let's go. Let's talk a little bit about the third stage.
okay.
So engagement of people is an interesting concept. It's often referred to, and I want to make this one disclaimer. I know you're in Europe. We're going to Europe. My research was all done in the United States. So while I know that this data is relevant outside the target demographic, there are some areas where it fits well outside of the US and some areas where it doesn't fit so well. So I want to be very clear when I say these things, I'm talking purely from a US economy model. Okay. Um,
Have you been able to identify specific differences in the third stage?
you mean between US and
And the
non-US?
rest of the world, yeah.
Oh, the absolutely. I've been able to identify the differences in all three stages. The
Mhm.
problem is that I don't have enough I don't have a statistically valid sample set
Yeah. Hmm.
to be able to write about those differences and have it be sufficiently researched.
Right.
And because of that, I haven't done the proof of concept. So and I don't feel it's necessary. To me, I think you read the book or spend 20 minutes with me on the phone and I'll do it for free. And I can help you identify whether or not this is going to be valuable for you. But even if the entire model isn't valuable, as I said, I don't, it's not for, I didn't research publicly traded companies and I didn't research solopreneurs. I've used bits and pieces of this for solopreneurs with great success. And I've used bits and pieces of this with massive corporations and had great success. I did a project for Xcel Energy, which is one of the three largest energy companies in the US. The US is split into thirds with energy. You got PG&E on one end, Con Edison on the East Coast, and in the middle, it's a company called Xcel Energy. They had a 5,000 employee customer service department. Their customer service department had its own board of directors and CEO and president reporting to the corporate.
Mhm.
And they wanted to transition that customer service department from a cost center to a revenue center and didn't know how to do that. And we used components in my model to help them make that transition. So this stuff applies across a lot of different places situationally. Okay.
Mhm. Mhm.
So give me just a
Very
second here
interesting.
because I
Yeah.
want to, yeah, I want to. So engagement is an interesting term and it's commonly thought of as the holy grail of human resources. The idea is if you can create engagement, you can um, you can get people to treat the business like it's theirs, get them to treat it like they own it, right?
Mhm.
So often owners say, if I can clone myself, right? If I can have 10 of me, right? But you don't want that. You don't want 10 of you. You want 10 people smarter than you with the same passion that you have about your business. That's engagement. I believe in what we're doing. I believe in how we're doing it. I understand it I'm a part of it. I love it. It's bigger than I can do by myself. I want to be part of this. How do I contribute? That's the key to engagement. So there's two components to engagement. One of them is creating the sense that each and every person is important. If you don't feel like you're a critical piece in the cog of the machine, you don't feel important and you will not be engaged. In the 80s, when my wife was selling telephone systems, she came up with the idea of calling the receptionist the chief introduction officer.
Mhm.
Because you think the receptionist, that's a nobody. Low paying job, unimportant, nobody pays attention to it, not totally dependent. But my wife brought to the table, she said, listen, this is the person that's the first human being that people calling your company usually talks to. Don't you think it's important that they do a good job when your company's being introduced?
Mhm.
So she raised the level of that position by teaching her customers why it was important. If you don't understand the role you play in your organization, if you don't understand how with that role gone, the whole thing breaks, you don't feel important. So the first part of engagement is understanding systems and structure and understanding not individual responsibilities like in adolescence, but understanding how individuals interact with one another. So I need to understand how my work product gets to me. I need to understand what happens with my work product when I send it down to the next level. And that way, the three of us have this little mini group and we understand what we each need and if there's anything we can do to make it better. And each individual, given that kind of knowledge and authority, creates these little mini quality of excellence bubbles. And when you build a whole organization that way, you create an environment where everybody feels important because they all understand that the process doesn't work without everybody,
Mm.
right? So that's the first piece. Did you want to ask me something?
Yes, Larry, I did. It all makes fantastic sense. I was just wondering, from your research, you clearly mapped the KPIs, the stages, what needs to be done, the decision making. How many of these companies, in terms of percentage, in the third stage, were actually engaging their employees in the way you are defining now an engaged employee should work? That was a long
Speaking,
question.
no, 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 it's okay.
Uh-huh.
Speaking from my personal experience, none of them were doing it before
Mhm.
me.
Mhm.
The ones that succeeded and chose to accept my consultative advice all adopted it and succeeded. I had one company that was losing $300,000. They'd been profitable for 20 years. It was the very first year they'd ever lost money. They lost $300,000. There were 50 employees. The run by the founder. The second year, they lost $500,000. Year three, month two, they were on pace to lose $800,000. That's when they called me. They called me. We spent a year working on the company. By the end of the year, they had broken even. Several people had retired because they weren't prepared for the changes that need to be made. One of the leadership team took over as executive, and the company turned it around and was profitable from that point forward and has been ever since. And that's been 12 or 13 years.
Mhm.
So the second piece of engagement is communication. Everyone needs to be able to get the information they need when they need it. And they need to be able to share knowledge with everybody so it's available when anybody else needs it. So there's an inbound and an outbound communication piece. So what you have to do in this environment is build that communication model and execute it. And it's fairly complex. Dealing with these two components is the most complex part of sustainability. Dealing with the components of adolescence is the most labor intensive.
Yeah. Isn't communication supposed to be a part of all three stages?
Well, it is. The problem is that if you believe in the theory that an organization that doesn't grow dies, if you're not growing, you're dying. Communication in youth is relatively easy because you're small. As you
Mhm.
get into adolescence, it's still relatively easy because you don't have so much expansion, so much complexity, so many departments, so many systems. It doesn't quite reach the level of a formalized process.
Mhm. Mhm.
Once you reach adulthood, it's too big to be organic. It
Mhm.
has to be transactional. It has to be structured. It has to be proactive. It can't be accidental. You have
Yeah,
to be
makes
able to
sense.
know who the conduits are, who the points of communication are. You have to be able to know when I need this information to go, I can make sure that these 800 people get it at the same time and understand it.
Mhm.
So you're absolutely right. It's just a greater level of formality, and it doesn't cause failure until you get into adulthood if you don't
Mhm.
have it.
Yeah. Wow. Very interesting insight.
Good questions. Some of the best questions I've gotten.
That's because I have experience also in different sizes of corporations, and I can observe and follow what you're saying.
Excellent.
Possibly. Possibly.
Excellent.
All right, great. Shall we go through the KPIs, or at least the ones that you find the most important for each
I
segment?
think we can, but I'm a little reluctant to do that because they're labels and people take labels and they make assumptions about them. For
Mhm.
example, let me give you an example. One of the components of adolescence is a business plan. When I say business plan, everybody says, okay, what's the big deal about a business plan? And I say, well, show it to me. And they go, well, we've got it around here somewhere. Hold on, I'll find it, right? So there's an article, a free article I have on my website called Why Business Plans Collect Dust. And the problem with business plans is people think that all they have to do is write it. No, that's not what you do with a business plan. That business plan is your operational model. That business plan is how you make decisions. When you make a decision, you need to be able to go to that business plan and say, I'm making a decision because this is what we plan for, right? Which does a few things. First of all, it makes planning more important because now you're saying, I'm really going to follow this. So I better pay attention. And it engages the rest of the organization because each part of the organization needs to have a say in the planning process. You don't want to create plans that conflict, right? The last thing you want to do is end up improving your sales by 100% and having fulfillment only able to fulfill 50% of that growth. Then you're going to piss off 50% of your market that you've already sold to and can't get product to, right? So the second part of business plans is that everybody, I say everybody too much, people think they only need one business plan. You need three business plans. Every business needs three business plans. You need a business plan for operations. You need a business plan so that every time a decision is made and every time you make a strategic move, you can go to your organization, to your staff, and say, we're making this move because it's part of the business plan. Here it is. We're serious about this. We do this. We follow it. We live by it. That's the operational one. Then you need one for your banker. I don't care how cash rich you are, it's prudent to have a financial backstop. You have to have a financial backstop. I don't care who you are. Apple has a financial backstop. Your bank wants different information about your organization than your operational people do.
Mhm.
All your bank cares about is how stable is your revenue and can you service the debt. You have to position that business plan in a way that answers those questions. If your leadership team doesn't understand that, then they don't understand the impact of their decisions. So you have to build that plan just so that your leadership team understands that financial side of your business operations. So when they make decisions, they're not shooting themselves in the foot. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The third plan is for the hypothetical investor. And people say all the time, I don't have an investor. I don't want an investor. Why do I need an investor's business plan? Very simple reason. It's the only way for you to understand the value of your organization.
Mhm.
If you don't know how to understand the value of your organization in someone else's eyes, then you don't know what it is yourself. You're misleading yourself. You're in the forest and you can't see the trees. And I don't suggest people write these so they can get investors. I want them to write it so they can understand the investor's perspective, right? Which is the ability to have solid leadership that leads to growth. Because investors know that an organization that isn't growing is dying. There's no middle ground. So when I talk about these 8 KPIs and I say business plan, people go, oh, okay. But it just took me 5 or 8 minutes to explain to you why it's not what people think. And it's not just about the label, it's about the meaning, the purpose, and how you use it.
Mhm. And I've also worked in planning, by the way, in business planning for a while and in strategy. And I've seen a lot of business plans and prepared lots of business plans in my life. So my question is, um, all these three types of business planning for different purposes, do they all come to the same numbers? So they're all reconciled. It's just the granularity is different and the way you present the information, or are they with slightly different content inside as well?
It's a good question. The short answer is they're all the same. They all come to the same conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
There are some differences, however. So in an operational model, you'll talk about boundaries. In a banking model, you'll talk about returns and the variability of returns, which doesn't matter to the operations people, right? So you have to identify cost and revenue based assumptions in a different way for a banker so that you can ensure, because what you're trying to do is make sure that they believe you understand your business well enough to be able to tell them what you're doing and be accurate. So you need to be able to talk about those financial variables in a way that impacts the capacity to service the debt. Staff don't care about that. So there's the granularity and there's the variance in the numbers, which you would never put in the financials of an operational business plan. When you go to an investor, you're looking at not servicing the debt, but servicing the growth, right? So the growth is the most expensive thing you can do. So the bank says, I want my money to pay back my loan. The investor says, I want profit to fund growth.
Yeah.
So those numbers get massaged a little bit differently. But at the end of the day, the baseline norm for all three end up being the same. It's just
Mm.
where what you talk about and where the variances come in shift on them. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. And if I may add, my line of thinking is that probably in the types of organizations that you've studied, it starts from the operational plan. But when it comes to publicly traded companies, it probably starts from the supervisory board business plans or investors presentations, where everything is
Absolutely.
then trickled down to departments and operational plans. But the starting point is, this presentation of how I'd like to look rather than how my company is really going to operate.
Exactly. And you've just touched on a really important point, and that is the demographic target market identified is not that market,
Mm,
right?
yeah,
And that's just because I couldn't do that many different businesses. I had to narrow it down to something that was consumable for me.
yeah.
But you're absolutely right. You're spot on.
Very interesting insights you shared, Larry.
Thank you.
Fantastic. I'm I was engulfed by this conversation. Very interesting research, and I'm sure that the book is worth reading as well. Where can people get in touch with you, get this 20-minute talk, or get your book?
Well, the book is available on all public platforms, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, I believe all the Play stores, Google and Apple Play Store. If you can remember businesses don't fail, just do a search on the web. I'm all over the web. The website is businessesdon'tfail.com. There's my email is in there. There's a communication portal in there. I have a monthly newsletter. There's 130, 40 blog posts in there. There's podcasts in there. It's not hard to find me. Just go to the website, sign up for the newsletter. In every newsletter, I put my email and I say, if there's anything you want me to write about or ask me about, shoot me an email.
Fantastic insights.
And I will say that the email is larry@mandelberg.biz. Don't even worry about the spelling. Just go online and search for Businesses Don't Fail.
Good tips. Thank you. Very useful.
Thank you very much.
Information. My pleasure.
All right.
Thank you for listening to Grow and Learn. We hope that you found our podcast informative, engaging, and inspiring. Our mission is to help you keep growing and learning, and we hope that our conversations and insights have provided you with practical advice and useful perspectives. If you're looking for personalized support and guidance to help you achieve your personal or professional growth objectives, I offer a range of services to help. As a trusted management partner and mentor, I work with businesses in the process of transformation, looking for new streams of business, as well as M&A. With an extensive professional network of experts and mentors, I can bring on board the right person or team based on the specific needs of the company I'm working with. To learn more about the services I offer and how I can help you achieve your goals, please visit my website at grownlearn.org. You can also reach out to me via email or social media. I'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this episode of Grow and Learn, please subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review. Your feedback is important to us, and it helps us to continue to create content that is relevant and valuable to our listeners. Thanks again for listening, and we look forward to sharing more insights and perspectives with you in the future.